Hello, and welcome to Get Career Curious, the podcast that gives you the inside scoop on careers, what it takes to get there, and what the job is really like. Today's guest is extra special. Not only is she an entrepreneurial powerhouse working with some of the most cutting-edge robotics startups in the country, but she also happens to be my niece and my namesake, Marita McGinn. Marita's career journey is anything but conventional. From cold pitching her way into her first startup job at an impromptu meeting at Whole Foods to running an accelerator program that funded the future of robotics, her path proves that building a meaningful career isn't about playing it safe. It's about staying curious, being bold, and trusting your gut. If you're wondering how to break into startups, what a career in sales can lead to, how to pivot with purpose, or just find a job that fits your real life, this is the episode for you. Welcome, Marita.
Hi, Marita.
Hello, Marita.
So fun having my namesake on the show.
I'm really excited to be here.
All right, so let's dig in. How did you start in entrepreneurship, working with startups?
Yeah, well, the last 10 years now working with early stage startups, and I think I found my niche pretty early. I honestly was pretty inspired by my two parents. My mom was a speech pathologist and started her own practice, and my dad's a carpenter and worked for himself his whole life. And I really enjoyed as a kid, seeing my parents kind of do their own thing and build businesses. So when I started in college, my school offered entrepreneurship. So I sort of just latched on to working with early stage startups. I think I've since really honed in on why I care about startups. But in the beginning, I just thought it was really super cool that these people were autonomous in what they do. And oftentimes entrepreneurs are experts in their field and they have something that they think is so cool that it should spin out and be its own business. And I was inspired by that when I was young and still am.
So when you're in college, your degree was it under a business degree and then it was a subspecialty?
I have a business background and I went to college from 2012 through 2016. I think there are only maybe 10 colleges across the US that had a concentration of entrepreneurship. I had a business degree and we studied all sorts of different aspects of running a startup, but there were a few really cool experiences sprinkled in. Like we would do business plans for startups that were in Chicago, so DePaul University, and we would do case studies for startups and really kind of do hands-on work with early stage companies. And yeah, it was pretty awesome.
So getting out of college, how did you get your first job? Was it through an internship or connections?
Yeah. So I have since learned that my connections are absolutely everything. I really care diligently on building strong relationships. So I had this leadership scholarship that I was a part of for 4 years. And it's a scholarship. It's how I paid for a vast majority of my schooling. And there was a woman named Fran who ended up being my first manager. And she was a couple of years older than me and had this scholarship. So I already had an in there. I thought she was working at a really cool startup at the time. So I just started reaching out to her, asking hey, would you take an intern? Would you take an intern? She never got back to me. And one day I saw her at Whole Foods and my heart was beating. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my moment to go say hi to Fran. And I was really nervous, but I pushed myself to do it. And I said, hey, I've sent you a few notes. I really want to work for your company. Can we set up a discussion and really talk about what that could look like? And that was my first leap into my first job, which was a media startup, but I focused on running this. It was called the Startup of the Year program. So basically we would take about 100 startups to different parts of the country and we do pitch competitions and large scale conferences. So that was my first job, but I think that moment of, cornering Fran at Whole Foods was the moment that mattered, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's some real persistence. I mean, that took a lot of courage to do. So how did you get this leadership scholarship? Tell me a little bit about that scholarship and how you got it.
Yeah, that scholarship was really meaningful to me. I not only learned a lot, but all of my best friends are through that scholarship. I got my first job out of that scholarship. I grew up in the Boston area and I just knew I wanted to go live in Chicago. I have family members who live out there. And I just had it in my mind. I'm like, I don't want to go to UMass Amherst. I want to go to Chicago. And I kind of feel like I had sort of willed it to be. But the only catch is that my college was extremely expensive and my family and I definitely could not afford it unless I had some pretty substantial financial aid. I had to write a few essays to get in. I spent a lot of time thinking about like, what is a unique story I could share? I actually think I spoke about my experience in Girl Scouts, which is so crazy, but I feel like ever since I was really young, I've had this sort of entrepreneurial beat. And with Girl Scout, like, when I was a little kid, I would like really go door to door. The other girls were like having their parents sell their cookies. And I worked really hard. So I wrote about that. And then I had to go to Chicago for an in-person interview. And I remember my friends and I had a concert booked. I was really excited to see this artist. And I decided like, you know what? I'm not going to. We see it with family friends in Chicago. I practiced my pitch over and over and over with those family friends. I feel like I did kind of what I teach startups how to do now, which is really strong storytelling and messaging. But yeah, I did the interview. It ended up being a really competitive process. I think it was like a 5% acceptance rate. And it kind of changed everything. Yeah, it was a really substantial annual scholarship. But then I also did all sorts of different leadership. Like basically, we had class where we had to do leadership training. A big part of it was volunteering. So it kind of showed me other parts of Chicago and different ways of living. It was a really diverse group of people and they're all doing really different things now. It was an amazing group of people.
Well, and it shaped kind of who you are now, because honestly, that is what you do for a living now. You're a leader and you help coach entrepreneurs in startups. So tell me a little bit, after your first job, how has your career evolved? I mean, you've had some significant moments that have shaped where you are today. So let's hear about those.
And I feel like my significant moments keep happening. So I'll tell you about my first big leap. So was living in Chicago. I was really lucky to work remotely. My company was headquartered in Las Vegas and I was in Chicago. So I like kind of learned something that I really care about now, which is autonomy in my work. I was very much the only one keeping track of what I do. So I had to learn how to be accountable to myself. But at a certain point, I reached a moment where I had been in Chicago for 6 years. And I was sort of like, what do I do now? And I want to challenge myself in a different way. So kind of in a more personal way versus professionally. So I decided to move to New York City and I interviewed for a role at a company called Indiegogo. At the time, it was like a really kind of notable company in tech. It's sort of pittered out a little bit. It was my first sales job, but I got really ill-equipped for this. I feel like I have always been good at talking to people, but having a quota and really being financially oriented at a company was pretty scary to me. I even remember in an interview, my final interview at Indiegogo was with like the CEO. And I said, hey, I've never done this before. I think I can do it. I always give young people the advice of saying blatantly, like, I know I can do this. Give me a chance. I absolutely will do a great job. So maybe I said it that way. I accepted a job at Indiegogo and it was my first sales role. It was absolutely amazing. I worked there for almost 3 years and that was the next chapter in me really honing in on my skills and kind of what I'm really good at.
I think sales is like a great career path that no one really knows about unless you have a family member who does it, because it's not like you go to school and study sales. What do you think about that as a career, and what skills do you need, and what are the good and bad of that particular career?
So I went in, I'm sure when you're working with lots of young people, the phrase imposter syndrome comes up quite a bit. When I had joined Indiegogo, I was, I think, 23 and really felt out of my depth. I was the only girl on the team. I was about 10 years younger than everyone else on the team. And I had all of these men around me telling me how to do things and what is the structure to get to a sale. And I tried it out for a little while. And then I realized like, no, I am someone who is casual and friendly. I ask good questions and I can kind of find my own way in what this means to me because I was really nervous around like just the word sales in general. And now I actually call it relationship management. People want to work with people that they like. And I found early, like, I'm going to build strong relationships with the people that I'm selling into, which by the way, were entrepreneurs. Indiegogo was a crowdfunding platform. So I would help startups launch their physical products and crowdfund in an effort to do that. I think oftentimes people can think sales has sort of like a got you or a sleazy aspect. But in reality, like I was just helping these companies fulfill their initiatives. So I actually read a book that was really helpful from Simon Sinek, and it's called Find Your Why. That's extremely helpful to me as I sort of started thinking about my attitude in sales and relationship management. And I learned I am a helper. And when I started thinking, okay, and really just helping these people, it changed everything for me. And all of the men I worked with said I was too accommodating or too nice. I get that I'm too nice a lot, but in reality, I was kind of crushing. I was the person who had the best sales numbers. I was delightful for these people to work with, and which has really aided me. Like I'm still in touch with a lot of the clients that I worked with even today.
What a great experience. So after Indigo, what did you do after that?
So I've had a lot of interesting little switch up and change ups. For the sake of our conversation, this is a good one to mention. So I worked at Indiegogo for about 2 years, but I really didn't enjoy living in New York City. It was too busy. I just didn't really feel like I found, my community. I was kind of sad. I was in Chicago, but I wasn't ready to move back home where my family is. So I convinced my boss at the time at Indiegogo to let me work part-time and to go travel the country in a van. So I did that for about 3 months. And weirdly enough, it was my best quarter yet. I was making so much money as like a part-time person working in a little van with my puppy. That kind of showed me I don't always need to do things the way other people view them. And it's okay to really take some big leaps. So that van trip was a big leap for me. Not only did I experience tons of fun and seeing our country, I really got to think about what do I care about outside of work, which has become a huge part of my life now. We all are people at work, but we have lives outside of work, and those parts of ourselves should be really nurtured. And it was my first experience learning that work doesn't need to be a hindrance to who I am outside of work and outside of my career. I remember there was one moment on the van trip where my biggest project, we would get like 5 to 10% of whatever a company raised on our platform. So obviously the companies that were raising more money, those are the ones you care about more. And I remember this one instance where one of our clients was going to jump to our competitor. They were about to launch like the day after. And I remember juggling. I was in my van. My dog had just finished swimming. It was my first instance of being like, how do I convince this person to stick with us? And my boss at the time, who ended up becoming an awesome mentor in my life, I wanted to lean on them and say like, hey, can you do this? I feel kind of out of my depth. And he really pushed me to manage it. And I did in my own way. And it was a little bit different. But yeah, I had so many interesting experiences on that trip where it really showed me that work doesn't need to look like going into an office every day. Like here I am negotiating on the Riverside in 1989 Chevy van. It was really fun. So it was an amazing experience. Looking back, I probably should have quit my job to just go have a break and have fun. My van trip ended up being kind of stressful, but I did have a lot of great experiences. And yeah, after I came home, I realized it was probably time for a new job. So that was my kind of next step.
So just going off what you said a moment ago with mentors, you've had some great mentors along the way. And how do you recommend people build and maintain those relationships without them being too needy or pushy?
I think mentorship can be really informal. Even my last job when I was at a large bank in the US, I was sort of told like, hey, you need to go find a mentor. And I just don't feel like that's how relationships are built. I think mentorship can be rather informal, build a relationship with someone, be specific about what you're looking for and how you can gain something from that person. But something that I think is, I'm thinking of one person right now. His name's Warren Katz. He's my former boss of mine, and he's just an incredible person here in Boston. And I feel like I connected with him on a mentor level because he's sort of, his way of thinking is how I want to be when I'm more established in my career. He has a very much like be at the your own way and find things like be authentically you. This person is highly successful, an exited entrepreneur, really big exit. He is a successful person, but he just wears like cat shirts and he has monkey shirts and he has, a mullet and he doesn't look like the person that he is. So I think it's important instead of like trying to force a relationship, it's important to find people that really have the same kind of inner parts as you. And that's what I find in Warren. I think we just think the same. And because of that, I was even a little nervous talking with him in the first couple of years of our relationship. But now we get together for like a quarterly lunch and normally I pay, which is a little ironic. And it's just a really great experience.
Well, that's some great advice on how to hone in on a mentor. And because I do think they do shape you along the way and they're important. So now, Marita, you are in a different role, and I think it's super exciting working with robotics companies. So can you tell me a little about what you're doing now? And it's such an exciting future. So I think this is an area where maybe some listeners really are interested in a career in robotics and kind of want to know, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I work at a company called Mass Robotics. We're a nonprofit based in Boston, and our role in our community is to support early stage startups. So we have about 100 companies working out of our space, and we have like basically any sort of tooling that they would need to build and iterate on their prototype. So I've got an interesting story of how I got into this that I'll share briefly. So my last role, I was at a bank, and the bank failed. It was a pretty enormous issue. The bank went insolvent. And with that, I decided, okay, I'm going to stay here for a couple of months. It was absolutely crazy. And then I actually quit my job and I learned about this role that I'm currently doing at Mass Robotics. And I ended up taking 4 months off in between those two jobs. And that was another moment similar to my van life experience that I kind of reset and refocused. I actually saw a career coach and I decided I really wanted to sector specialize, meaning I wanted to spend time in a specific industry because the vast majority of my career had been a generalist. So I decided, because Boston is a huge hub for robotics and deep tech general, and I've always really enjoyed working with highly technical people. I find in regards to working with entrepreneurs, technical people are earnest, they're highly practical. And I also think they're building things that actually matter. I think it's just the flavor of entrepreneur that I really like working with. So I wanted to join Mass Robotics, one, to sector specialize and sort of up level my own career. But two, like I think robotics is genuinely going to play a huge role in how we live and how our future looks. Even just this week led a session around tariffs and how to think about positioning your robotics startup as a company that can really assist Americans with the changing tariffs and how we actually get our goods. So to any young people interested in getting into robotics, I think it's like now is the right time. We're really at the very early days. And Even last week, I had a conversation with one of our interns who felt like she's sort of missing the moment with AI. And she's just sort of like, well, I feel like I already missed my chance to get in. And I couldn't disagree more. Like now is the moment, and it's never too late to get into something.
Well, especially if you're interested in it. If you are deeply interested in robotics, I don't think we'll ever be too late to get into it. What degree do most people coming out who are in robotics? Is that engineering or math, or what are those degrees?
Yeah, it's mostly engineering, all sorts of different engineers. I work with a lot of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. I work with people who have all sorts of different backgrounds. I think robotics is one of those fields that you don't necessarily need to even have a college degree. If you are someone who can, build physical things and know how the systems work, you can find roles. I also think that we think about hard skills and soft skills. And I always was sort of like disappointed I had so many soft skills. But in reality, the skill sets of relationship building or sales, business development, marketing, these are all things that any company needs. I would especially say that robotics startups need help on business building, which is essentially my whole job right now, is helping technical founders learn how to be really skillful salespeople. So I think for people who are coming out of school with business degrees, there's a place for them in robotics as well.
That's fabulous. And can you talk a little bit specifically what you do?
Certainly. So I have what I view as a pretty niche job. I run a startup accelerator. Accelerators are probably not something that like the general public particularly knows about, but in the startup world, it's essentially like startup boot camps. So I run a 3-month long accelerator program for 10 robotics companies. And we fund each one of these companies. The state of Massachusetts is funding my program, and we fund each one with $100K, which is pretty meaningful capital, and we don't take any equity. But my day-to-day, so I would kind of to conceptualize what an accelerator and what my job is. I'm a mentor to startups, but I'm also an operator of this program. So there's 10 startups, about 100 mentors and speakers, and we're all together in person every week for 3 months. And the whole program ends at a conference called the Robotics Summit and Expo here in Boston. So my job, I had to build this whole infrastructure. I joined last year and we did our first program. Each week has kind of a general theme. The overarching metric for the program is around customer discovery, which really means understanding and interviewing your customers to make sure you're making the right product. Oftentimes with entrepreneurs, they can kind of have tunnel vision and they can just sort of like not even look up. Especially with engineers, they just build, and they kind of forget, oh, someone has to buy this. So we teach them how to get their customers involved early. But if you were to bucket it into a role, it'd probably be project management, putting something together, getting all the pieces in place, being highly organized, and then executing to have the vision be done.
So do you ever bring on interns to help you with these roles in the accelerator?
So we have a really close relationship with Northeastern University out in Boston, and they do something that I think every college should do, which is their co-op program. So it's actually a 5-year undergraduate degree, but your last year, you do a bunch of different co-ops and they're paid almost always. I always pay interns, but I had an awesome woman join as my intern last year. So she was an operations intern. She focused on basically coordinating large parts of the accelerator program. And she would also do quite a bit of sort of like sales legwork, some lead generation for the startups. And what I think is pretty interesting about her story, her first co-op was at a biotech lab where she was pipetting various types of, chemicals. I don't really know what they do in biotech labs. And then she joined me, startups, for about 6 months. And now she's working in New York with the Attorney General of New York. So she's done 3 completely different roles. And I think it's really special. So I was once an intern. My first job was an intern, and then I became a full-time teammate. So yeah, I think internships are really important for young people to get into. And I'd recommend that you kind of just have to do something a little different that is a little out of your comfort zone to just test things out.
That's awesome advice. So, Marita, in your perspective, how do you see AI affecting the business landscape and in particular in the robotics industry?
Yeah, so we talk about AI all the time at Mass Robotics. We call it embodied AI or physical AI. It's when artificial intelligence is involved in our physical world, like in robotics or anything that has a real product attached to it. I think we're still at the early days of how AI is going to affect robotics. I think there's quite a bit of, you might even know or see the Boston Dynamics with the humanoids, or even Tesla has a humanoid trying to do all sorts of work in manufacturing floors or warehouses. It's going to take a long time for those things to really be adopted. I was recently at a robotics conference, and Rodney Brooks, who is a really esteemed MIT professor, he's an entrepreneur, he spoke about how long it's really going to take for AI to be a part of every single person's day-to-day. I think, at least in my household, my partner works in AI too, so we talk about these things all the time. But to the general public and people who are just getting started in their career, I don't think it's going to have an enormous impact. I use AI every day to do small tasks for me, like research projects or rewording certain things. Maybe it's the salesperson in me, but I do think that, one-to-one human touch relationships are always going to be extremely important. So I view AI as a real tool versus something that's going to be coming for my job. I don't see that.
Yeah. No, I don't either. In relationship building and sales, I think there's always the human element that's going to take over and win out.
Yeah, but it is an amazing tool. I feel like I get more done with ChatGPT, but who knows what'll happen? I don't know. I mean, working in robotics, we have a lot of really crazy ideas of how robots can really take over for jobs that are dangerous or jobs that are not fit for humans to do. But I think we're still a long ways away from seeing that really fully integrated. Like, think of self-driving cars. We thought that we would have that completely in every single household years ago, and they're still not there. So it takes a long time for these technologies to be integrated.
Yeah, totally agree. Looking at all the fun things you do, what are your favorite aspects of your job?
I think I'll give you two answers. My absolute favorite part of my job is just the huge breadth of innovations that I get to learn about. I'm surrounded by startups who are creating really interesting things. To give you a few examples of the diversity at Mass Robotics, one of my companies I'm working with has a ropeless lobster fishing trap. So instead of having a buoy with a rope, this has a compressed air buoy. So when a fisherman knows that there's lobster in his trap, he can just press a button and it'll immediately come to the surface. Another person is working on a sign language robot where it basically sits up like this, and deaf blind people hold on to it and actually can understand signs through that way. Yeah, it's just really cool. I have a company who's doing all sorts of stuff. So it's just really fun to be around so many different and diverse ideas. I think it keeps my brain moving and my brain thinking differently. But then on my actual work side, I learned early in my career that I really care about my autonomy and working, kind of for myself in a way. So I've had a lot of different kinds of managers, and my current boss and manager just sort of trusts me and knows that I'm going to do the right thing. It's just a really great experience. And I like being able to be in charge of my day and know what I'm doing and keep myself accountable. I actually just did a predictive index test. I don't know. Have you heard of the predictive index? It's really cool. And I learned that I have the archetype of a captain. So someone who likes to put all the pieces together and then steer the ship into the storm. That's kind of the vibe I like. I've done a lot of different things, but I think that's what I'm really good at is being at the helm of a larger project. And I just find it really fun. And I love seeing all of my work pay off for a finale.
which is something I have at work right now.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, you're in a unique situation being able to work with such innovative technologies and smart up and coming people. And yeah, it seems like a perfect fit for you with your experience. If you could do it all over again, are you pretty happy with what you're doing, or would you have chosen a different path?
So at first, I think like my path has been pretty linear. I've only worked with early stage startups. I've done a bunch of different things with early stage companies, but the thing that pulls my career thus far together is the fact that I've been a supporter of early stage entrepreneurs. I had one change where I was thinking like maybe I would stick with banking, just because candidly, like for anyone who's listening, like banking's pretty lucrative. You can make some serious money in banking. But I just was not happy. And for a long time, I viewed work as work. And I just sort of gave up on finding something that I found a lot of intrinsic fulfillment from. And I'm really happy with where I'm at now. I know I could be making more money, but I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I'm respected by my team and been given all of the things that make me happy at work. And I don't think this is going to be the last time that I make a transition. I am 30 now, and I value different things in my life. My perpetual achievement that I really cared about in my early 20s is less important to me now. And now I'm really interested in thinking about where can I go next. Kind of a funny thing about me is I love hospitality. I have had a lot of jobs in restaurants and being a barista. And now I actually run an Airbnb with my mom. And I kind of been scratching the hospitality itch with that. So now I'm thinking like, okay, how to expand myself into some side hustles? Like I want to do Airbnb for myself. There's all sorts of different things. But yeah, I don't think I would do anything differently in my career. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm happy that I always did my own thing. I think I've been given a lot of advice to go in certain directions. I'm happy that I just trusted myself, that I knew what I was doing. And I can always ask for help if something doesn't work. I've done a lot of digging of how to get through the internal noise of perpetual achievement.
Achiever. Yeah.
Yes.
A perpetual achiever. On that note, because I think so many people do go for the jobs with the more money or the more prestige. And I think those are fine for a certain part of your career. But at some point, everyone in their career comes to grapple with, is this really my purpose? And the real point of this podcast is to help listeners understand, like, you can find a career that suits you and fills you personally. And it might take some pivots and turns, but eventually there are jobs out there that will marry your passion and your purpose, that you are excited to go to work every day versus get paid super well and it kind of not filling you in other areas of your life. So
yeah,
what
you're
advice
totally
do you
right.
have there?
I love this because it's something I just had to go through, because I really thought I was just going to stick on the banking track and try to make a bunch of money. And in reality, I'm making about half as much as I could be making as a banker. And I'm just, every day I feel so happy that I didn't go down that path and I'm doing something that I really care about. I love what you just said around, like, at some point in your career, you're going to have to face this. I guess maybe this doesn't happen for everyone, but I do think it's really important for people to question themselves, step back, instead of just go, really think, what do I want my job to provide me? So for me, I really care about, I don't want to be in an office every day. I go in like once or twice a week right now. I wanted a team that I felt matched my personality of being casual and just being yourself. I did a stint in corporate America and I realized it felt a little phony to me. I wasn't perfect for me. I know it's perfect for some others. I took was 28 and I took a pretty big pause, and I also seeked real help. I saw a career coach to figure out, what am I good at? And what do I really care about? And I think I was in my early 20s really caring about my posts on LinkedIn and what people thought I was doing and the prestige. And now I'm sort of like, I work for myself, I do what I want, and I'm providing for my family. And I don't need to chase enormous dollars. I came up with what I make now is what I need to make. That's it. Especially for people listening who are in, I live in Boston, so places where the cost of living is much higher, and also salaries are enormous. Like I'm in a bubble. It's normal for people to make $350,000 in a regular job. It's not normal. That's something that happens in Boston, and I don't need to prescribe to them.
Appreciated you sharing your wisdom today, Marita. You have really kicked ass in your career, and you have a long career left ahead of you. It's super fun to see. And also, I just love seeing you working with the young companies and offering your wisdom. Those companies are doing some amazing things. You're working with companies who are going to better the world and better people's lives. And that's got to give you some personal satisfaction as well, I assume.
It really does. It's kind of a cool full circle moment where, I started thinking that what I wanted to major in college, my parents were inspirations to me because of their entrepreneurial experiences. And now I'm working with startups, so I agree with you. I think they do have the potential to change enormous parts of our world. And I kind of view them as the people who are going to be helping us the most. It's really important that new technologies are adopted into our world. And yeah, so I just feel really lucky right now in my work and in my life. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. At Get Career Curious, our mission is to help you explore careers that align with your passion, purpose, and potential. Here are 3 powerful takeaways from my conversation with Marita McGinn. First, careers aren't linear, and that's a good thing. From startups to sales to running a robotics accelerator, Marita's journey is proof that pivots are part of the process. Second, relationship building is a superpower. Whether it's landing your first job or leading innovation in a niche field, your network and your authenticity matter. And last, work should support your life, not the other way around. Marita reminds us that success doesn't have to mean burnout, and that redefining your priorities is a sign of growth, not failure. So if you found this episode helpful, please like and subscribe to this channel. Better yet, share this episode with a friend who's curious about startups, innovation, robotics, or designing a career on their own terms. And don't forget, join our community at getcareercurious.com for behind-the-scenes extras, tools, and real talk from professionals who are doing the work they love. I'm your host, Marita McCahill. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay career curious.